Appreciate you all taking the time to come out and listen to a marine biologist talk for a while. My background is in biological sciences with an emphasis in marine biology. You probably read my bio on the flyer, so I won't get redundant. But I've worked here at Bolsa Chica for 7 years now and been with the Department of Fish and Wildlife for going on 14 years now. And I'm happy to talk about fish. Fish are one of my favorite subjects, especially marine fish. And on the slide here, we have a leopard shark, which is, I think, one of the most beautiful species of marine fish we have off our coast here. And I hope to make you more familiar with some of the common fishes we have here at Bolsa Chica, as well as our neighboring wetlands. So the fish that you'll hear me talk about are also going to be characteristic species that you'd find at Upper Newport Bay or Seal Beach, things of that nature. I'll try to characterize the marine fish habitat here at Bolsa Chica and describe why it's important and so on. And so with that, I think I'll get started. I have a quote here from a marine ecology text that says, "Estuaries are one of the most productive areas on Earth, and fish biomass in these habitats ranks with that of our marine regions of upwelling, coral reefs, and kelp beds." And I like that quote to start this talk off with because it helps explain that, yeah, we do have a lot of fish, a lot of biomass, marine biomass here at Bolsa Chica in similar habitat areas. Because a lot of people will drive by here and think, well, what's it good for? It just looks like a bunch of mud and weeds to me. And okay, so you got birds. Well, one of the reasons we have so many birds here, and this is like a world-renowned place to come and look at birds. I mean, I'm looking at birders in front of me, and of course a lot of these birds are here because there are fish here for those birds to eat. So it is important in terms of biomass, and another reason why this habitat is important, it not only supports the birds and other organisms in the ocean that are coming to feed on the birds, your marine mammals and larger fish species and so on, but our species likes to eat fish. I don't know about you, but I enjoy eating fish. And so I'll try to point out some of the many fishes that our birds are eating or that are here in this marine nursery, really. Bolsa Chica and places like Bolsa Chica are really nurseries for marine fishes, and so that's one of their important habitat values and why we need to preserve habitats such as this. As a matter of fact, 90–95% of the wetlands in California have been lost to development. Most of the human population wants to live on the coast. Of course, we know that's true here in California. And if you were to go back in time here 150, 200 years, this all would have been open marshes and wetlands and habitat. And, but now it's scrunched down and we have these little habitat islands. In this photo here you can see the flood control channel. We were just talking about that a moment ago. And that is the one source of fresh water for Bolsa Bay. And then I'll start characterizing some of the other habitats here. Oh, but again, I mentioned, you know, the birds tell us that there are fish here. We have abundant bird life here, and a lot of the birds are here eating the fish. So here's a gathering here of egrets at Bolsa Chica. So examples of our fish-eating birds in this slide. You'll see great egrets, a great blue heron, and snowy egrets. In this slide, here's some other examples. White pelicans, just this morning I saw a few white pelicans out there in the muted tidal basin. Of course, our California brown pelicans. There's cormorants in this slide. And you're all familiar with the birds, but these are all here feeding on the fish. Here's a lovely shot of our pocket marsh just from last October, and a big collection of birds. And when I see a big group of birds like that, I know that the fishing is good. They're there because there are a lot of fish in the water at that time. They might have come in on an incoming tide or something like that. And I love this shot. This western grebe is holding probably a top smelt, could be a jack smelt. The top smelt is the most common fish in this type of marine habitat. Okay, so here's a slide that is to show you where all the fish habitat is, and I don't think my pointer is going to work too well on this, but this slide shows most of the reserve. The part of Bolsa Bay up here in the northern half is cut off, but we have Bolsa Bay. We have the new full tidal basin that was created roughly a decade ago. We have the pocket marsh, which you saw in an earlier slide, as well as muted tidal basins, which were created. As I think you're all aware, we had a major restoration occur in 2004, 2006, and that significantly increased the fish habitat here at Bolsa Chica. That was the purpose of that restoration, was to increase fish habitat here. Did a good job of it. And most of the fish habitat here is of marine nature. In other words, when I test the salinity, it's the same as the salinity off the coast here, around 34, 35 parts per thousand. So if you get above that, then you start to get quite saline. And due to evaporation, some of the areas in the back during the summer can get hypersaline, and few, if any, fish can tolerate that. There are some areas that have freshwater fish, but they're way in the back of the property. So for the most part, this is marine fish habitat, good marine fish habitat. And some of the more saline areas, you'll have a little less species diversity. This slide complements the previous one, just to give you an idea of the acreage. So in Bolsa Bay is a state marine conservation area, and the only allowable take is right here, walking distance. We have one fishing area on this reserve. It's been in place since the 1970s. It's about 210 acres, and it gets its seawater from Huntington Harbor here. So that's the source of the seawater for Bolsa Bay. That's this bay along Pacific Coast Highway, which you've known for decades. And the source of fresh water is from the flood control channel that I showed you in a couple of slides ago. The pocket marsh, I showed you in earlier slides, that's approximately 35 acres. And its seawater actually comes from Bolsa Bay. So the pocket marsh was connected to Bolsa Bay during the restoration by a very long culvert. So it feeds seawater into that. The full tidal basin is also a state marine conservation, but there is no take allowed unless it's for scientific research. So if you have a scientific collecting permit, we may allow you with a permit to do some collecting of fish, but otherwise there's no recreational or commercial take whatsoever. And it gets its seawater from that inlet down south of here near Sea Point Avenue. And I like to point that out because a lot of people that come here to Bolsa Chica don't realize that Bolsa Bay and the new full tidal basin are actually separate. They're separated by a levee, and they do not communicate water with one another. So those are two separate bodies of water. And then the muted tidal basins were created during the restoration. They are connected to the full tidal basin. So water comes in that inlet. In fact, if I go back, water comes in the inlet here, and flows into this, and then it goes through water control structures into the muted tidal basins. So again, this is a no-take marine reserve here, and this is a marine reserve also, but there's only take right up there at the north end of it. And then again, I give you the area there. So there's, if you add this up, there's over 800 and a quarter acres of marine fish habitat, roughly. And that's not all the fish habitat, but you know, for our purposes today, that's certainly the bulk of it. And another noteworthy thing about these areas, in addition to fish and marine vertebrates, we do get occasional visitors of marine mammals. We all have heard about the dolphins that have visited. We did once have a dolphin come in to the basin, and it had domoic acid poisoning, and it unfortunately it was stranded in, you know, it was taken away and had to be put down because it was so sick. But that's the only time one came in there, and it was really sick. It was a common dolphin, and occasionally we do get California sea lions come and visit, and I do have a picture of one. Later on, I'll show you. Oh, and sea turtles. I wanted to cover all the marine critters. Now, there have been a couple of sightings of green sea turtles right near the inlet. So again, when I'm talking about the inlet, I'm talking about this area here. And so my colleagues who work for a National Marine Fisheries Service, during the summer months, they will come and survey that basin periodically once a month just to see if they'll find any turtles, because it's shallow and warm and we've got abundant eelgrass beds. It is potentially good habitat for the green sea turtles that we have here locally. So I want to talk a little bit about the environmental factors before we get down to the species. You know, what do the fish living here have to deal with? And in estuaries and bays like this, of course, there's water temperature, there's salinity, there's dissolved oxygen, and we know that's important. Recently, you probably heard on the news there was a die-off in Marina del Rey, I believe it was, because they had a plankton bloom, and the water basically became anoxic. There wasn't, you know, all the dissolved oxygen gets consumed, and then the fish suffocate. So certainly dissolved oxygen is very important. pH, tidal currents can affect fish, and not so much here at Bolsa Chica, but in some places fish can potentially get isolated in pools. But salinity is very important because you have changes in salinity. In certain areas it gets hypersaline. A lot of fish can't tolerate that. So what they do, if the salinity gets too strong, they're going to move closer to the ocean, closer to areas where they're more comfortable. So back in the back areas of this property, in the muted tidal areas during the summer, we get a lot of evaporation. It starts to get hypersaline. Your fish biodiversity is going to go down, and it's going to be limited to a handful of species that can tolerate the higher salinities. And striped mullet is one of those fish it's really a champion in dealing with salinity. Two other fish that are highly tolerant of salinity changes in wetlands are the two pictured here. The fish in the top photograph is the California killifish. And it's a very small fish. You can see on the photograph there, the person is holding it in the palm of your hand. So they don't get any bigger than about 3 inches long. And they are a surface-oriented fish, so they're going to be around in the surface. And this is a popular one for some of the diving birds to capture. So your black skimmers that are around here and terns and things might be picking this up for feeding their chicks. And the lower fish is Atheronopsaphanus, the tough-smelled. Sometimes the Latin comes to me first. I'm sorry. I have to do my master's thesis on that species, so that's why I look at that and say Atheronops. Okay. Anyway, that is a very common fish here. That and its relatives are very common. It's related to the California grunion. They're in the same family, very closely related. California grunion do spawn at the inlet. So at that ocean inlet down there where the water comes in and there's sand underneath those bridges that people are driving over, when there are grunion runs, we find evidence of that, and the birds love that. The birds will just swamp to that and to feed on all the eggs. You can see all the eggs over the sand and things like that. So these are two species that are very tolerant of changes in salinity in wetlands. And this is a diagram of common fishes that we find here, and I did mention already previously the California killifish as well as the top smelt. It's close relative to jack smelt. It was one of those two that was in that picture of the grebe I showed you a few minutes ago. California grunion, as I mentioned, see they all look very similar. Pacific sari and California needlefish are all examples of fishes that occur here, and you all have been given my fish list, and this is the most up-to-date copy, and it's a little bit on the other side too, but this is the most up-to-date copy of the fish that I know to occur here. So it doesn't mean that, I mean there could well be other species, but these are the species that I know for sure have been documented here. I've either seen them myself or other researchers have documented them in various surveys over the years. And as I learn new species, I add to it. So I have this arranged by family with the scientific names. And incidentally, I should explain that I've highlighted in gray certain species, and the reason why I called those out on the list is those are our cartilaginous fishes. You'll see, I think there's 8 here. Species of shark skates or rays that have been documented here at Bolsa Chica. And then it also gives you an indication of where they've been found. And they could be in the other places too. But so like I say, at a minimum, we have these, and this is over 60 species of marine fishes that have been documented here. And shows you that's quite a bit of fish biodiversity. And it includes these, and these are all examples of fish that our birds will eat. I know from personal experience, having been involved in dietary studies with the seabirds on the nesting islands in Bolsa Bay, that our terns do pick up, have picked up all of these species, especially the top smelt and the grunion and the jack smelt. Those in particular are popular food items for those elegant terns, Caspian terns out there. But they do get the others. The California needlefish is one I've often seen the osprey with. So they're all good eats. I have the red line to the tidewater goby. That's a freshwater species that does not occur here at Bolsa Chica, but all the other guys do. So we have a handful of different gobiid species. The arrow cheek spot, shadow goby, bay goby, and the long-jawed and mudsucker. So those are guys that like to sit on the muddy bottom, and you may have seen them without realizing that if you happen to walk over a beautiful bridge down there at the South Lot, you know how you can walk over that bridge and you look down on a clear day, you can see maybe little fishes sitting on the bottom. Some of those, it's a good chance if they're just sitting there very quietly, they could be gobies. That's their habit. They'll sit quietly on the bottom until something that they want to eat goes by, and then they'll grab it really quick. Of course, the birds can see them, and the birds will try to grab them too. So these are probably, I know the egrets like to eat these guys. I have seen many of our larger egrets and our great blue herons eat the mudsuckers. The long-jawed mudsucker is the one fish on this page that can get pretty big. I mean, and by pretty big for a goby, that's a whopping goby, and you know, pretty big around. And I've seen our great blue herons knock those guys back. Pretty fun to watch. Of course, they eat frogs and mice and other things too. We have anchovies here. I think we're all aware that anchovies are a very important food source for pretty much everybody wants to eat the anchovies, and of course they are also harvested for human consumption, as we know, as well as pet food. Northern anchovy is probably the most abundant and important. This is a schooling fish that will probably come in here in schools and maybe go in and out. So it's not going to be a resident fish necessarily. Very important to our seabirds. This is probably the #1 fish our seabirds want to get for its chicks. And we have pipefish here. I mentioned earlier we have abundant eelgrass beds in the basin. In the basin conservation area some years ago, about 2008, we actually did some eelgrass planting. So we had scuba divers from the department as well as volunteer organizations go out to Cabrillo, and they harvested eelgrass and they brought it here. We processed it, put it in plugs, and divers went out and actually planted it on the bottom in transit, and it took off, and it's just great. And that's one of the reasons why it's probably going to be good for the sea turtles, but it's great for little fishes, and it's one of the reasons why this is a good nursery. When you have that kind of vegetative cover on the bottom and the thick eelgrass and stuff, that provides habitat for your little baby fishes to hide. And so you're going to have little tiny fishes and a lot of tiny invertebrates. And fish like these like to be in those eelgrass beds. They're long and skinny like eelgrass, and they have the kind of tail that can wrap around and hang on to the grass. These are in the very same family as seahorses. I have no documentation of seahorses occurring here, though they could. We haven't found any yet, but these are in the same family. And one thing I like to bring up when I talk about this family of fishes is that if you see one that's pregnant and has a big belly, that's a male. Yeah, it's the one species I know of where the male is the one that gets pregnant and gives birth to the babies. I just think that's cool. It's one of the reasons I love marine biology. Okay, we have croakers. Why are they called croakers? I should point that out. This family of fishes, the Cyanidae, are called croakers because the males, underwater, the males will make a sound to attract mates that divers have described as sounding like croaking. They have, one way to tell the males, when you see them in the commercial fishery and they're opened up, they have, the males will have big developed muscles along their abdomen, and they use those abdominal muscles to make this croaking sound. And it's used for attracting the females. But that's why the family is called croakers. And these are all common fishes, not only here in Bolsa Chica, but off the coast here. In fact, I've listed where they've been found in our surveys, Bolsa Bay, Bolsa Basin, as well as the state beach off here. When the Department of Fish and Wildlife has done fish surveys, they find them out there. Many of these same fish are fish that you'll see your recreational fishers pulling in when they're doing the beach fishing. And they are, so they're recreationally important and commercially important. You've got your queenfish, the white sea bass. So the white sea bass would be the largest species here. We see them here at Bolsa Chica with the bars. That's the young ones. They are delicious if you haven't eaten them. It's one of my favorites. California Corbina and the other croakers there. This fish here is is the spot fin croaker that's being measured by a graduate student at Cal State Long Beach who did some surveys and some research here some years ago. So there's those. Also flatfishes, we found a variety of flatfishes, as you'll see on your list there. And this slide is to illustrate that they're in all size classes, from babies. On this side of the slide, you see little tiny baby turbot in there. And I mentioned that this is a fish nursery. And there's the babies that were found in the nursery. And then here you have this monster. This is a California halibut that was found in the basin. So all extremes. And as we know, these are fish that are important to commercial and recreational fisheries. So the little ones, the seabirds will be eating the little ones. I have seen, say, Caspian terns, for example, trying to swallow the diamond turbits, which are pretty hard. It seems like they can't quite get them past their gape, but they try. And so I think they give up sometimes. I put in 2 slides. This was just a bigger picture of the same one, just to show you. It was such an impressive picture. I guess that's why I put 2 pictures of it in there. Here are examples of some of our sharks and rays, which I highlighted on the fish list a moment ago. The round stingray is very common in these areas around here in shallow waters. So when you hear on the news that stingrays are around and you have to watch yourself at the beach, it's this little guy here, this round stingray, and because they come in very close to shore where it's shallow, and because they have barbs at the base of their tail, if you step on them, you're really going to get a painful wound from that. They come in here to spawn, to mate, in embayments like this. And then this little guy here is a gray smooth hound shark. This is also a common fish here, Bolsa Chica. And that's both of these species you will see, you can see when you're over that bridge, when you're walking over the bridge and you look down, especially in the summertime. So you come here in the summertime and you probably have seen the round stingrays swimming. They're coming in to get into the shallow areas to mate. Very common here. And they're here all the time. They're also here a lot in Rabbit Island. Those of you who are familiar with Rabbit Island, in that channel around there, there are a lot of these little fishes in there. Here's 2 more examples. The leopard shark, you saw on my title slide. I just love that picture. I see them in here all the time. And then the baby, this baby bat ray. Now I don't know if the bat ray was born here or probably born offshore and swam in here because it's a safe place. I think instinctually these young fish probably come into these embayments because it's just a little bit safer. There's more places for them to hide from the larger predators that could easily kill a little baby. That little guy there, when it's an adult, will have a big wingspan. They get big. They have big heads on them and a long wingspan when you see them out in the ocean. And these are all harmless. I should point out that all of these are harmless to people, with the exception of this guy. If you step on his barb, then you'll get hurt. And by the way, they removed the barbs before they measured them for this study. They were measuring them, and some of them, these fish were tagged, and then they had radio tags in them, and they were able to determine their movements, and they published several papers about that. But anyway, these animals are not a threat to people. I like to point that out because sharks get a bad rap out there, and very few species of sharks worldwide are harmful to humans. Humans are far more harmful to sharks. You know about shark finning and horrible things that our species does to them, and throwing the whole ecosystem out of balance by doing that. Sharks provide an important ecological niche, and so it's good that they have a place like Bolsa Chica, the little ones, to come in and hide from bigger things that want to eat them. But here's an example where they couldn't hide from this guy. So I took these pictures last October, or is it December? It was December. I just happened to be out at the inlet, and it was full tide. There was, oftentimes at full tide, we might see sea lions foraging around the inlet there. And this male, I saw him catch several fish, and more than one of these sharks. That's a brown smoothhound shark he has in his mouth, and he's slapping the heck out of it. I mean, you could just hear him smack on the water. And so he catches a little shark and smacks it until he kills it. So that's just another shot. And then here's a better shot where you can see, and there's the side of the shark there. And this, by the way, is a male. We know he's a male because the male California sea lion has a sagittal crest on his skull. When they become sexually mature, they have that crest, and you can tell. So unfortunately, I didn't get together any more slides on fish for you, but that gives you kind of an overview of many of the common fish that occur here on top of the list that I showed you. Obviously, I don't have pictures for all of those species, but just some summary points. I talked about the importance of fish biomass in bays and estuaries, like here at Bolsa Chica, as well as Seal Beach and Newport Beach and so on. Fish biomass is high, and that is good for the commercial and recreational fisheries for humans, as well as the various forms of marine life that are dependent on the fish that are born here or can, live here until they get big enough to go someplace else. They do have environmental challenges: salinity, dissolved oxygen, water temperature. Obviously, if it gets too hot, they don't like that. But for the most part, they're pretty tolerant of cool water because the ocean out here is pretty cool. And I showed you some examples of birds that like to eat our fish here, and I didn't show you all the pictures. I mean, of course, we have the elegant terns, the royal terns, the Caspian terns, the black skimmers, and it goes on and on. The California least tern that eat fish. And I gave you a fish list. So that's all the slides that I have for today for you.
Thank you.